Welcome, everyone, to In the Hot Seat. For our repeat viewers, thank you for joining us again. For those new to the show, every 2 weeks we put industry experts and or customers in the hot seat for a lively discussion, some debate, even some discourse as we humanize the digital experience. All aspects of the customer lifecycle are up for discussion, as well as the technologies used throughout each phase of the journey. In this episode, we're going to look at go-to-market strategies, challenges, and trends. And we're joined by two revenue experts from Revenue Reimagined, Dale Zwizinski and Adam J. So, Kristy, what do you think we're going to talk about today?
Well, I'm actually really excited because this is one of my favorite topics, talking about go-to-market strategies, challenges, and trends. And I noticed that when we were talking earlier, we were talking about fractional roles. And I think that's a fascinating concept overall, to be a fractional anything. But what I see here is, according from data to Statistica, 42 million people are going to be solopreneurs in the US by 2026. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
there's even an organization called GigX where they just have fractional executives across a bunch of different topic levels, from COO, CEO type jobs all the way to, CROs, et cetera. It's been an interesting shift, I think, and certainly from a startup perspective, I mean, opens up a lot of different opportunities. Like I do chief strategy officer fractional roles once in a while, and that's for a small startup, it's hard to afford somebody full time for something like that. But
Right. And unfortunately, in startups, go to market is often missed a lot of times. It's, one of the things that leads to startup failure, unfortunately.
yeah, that's absolutely true. And certainly today with the lots of options and product led growths and community led growth like we talked about
Right.
recently, and then just plain old building the sales process and figuring out marketing and how they work together, all those things. It takes a lot of expertise to get it right.
Yeah, it does. It does. Getting it right is often a question of debate in and of itself, right? Like, where does it
Yeah.
live in the company? Does it live in one
Yeah.
organization, across the organizations? And you have to wonder, when it comes to those fractional roles, how are those people excuse me, how are they successful? Because
Yeah, and
especially if it lives across the organization.
Eh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, it's always kind of a tough situation, I think. But can you get by with that? Can it help you kind of jumpstart things? Which I think a lot of times that's the real issue, is getting the talent in there to help really lay the foundation, and then turn that over to the team over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we bring on our guests?
I think we should.
All right. Today we have Dale Zwizinski, co-founder of Revenue Reimagined, co-host of the Revenue Reimagined podcast, which apparently is the exciting part. So maybe we'll hear more about that. Helping founders bring their products to market through the latest revenue strategies. Dale has helped founders and startup companies in 7 different countries build and scale revenue teams. Adam is a LinkedIn startup top voice, which apparently is a little bit of a rub here. So we'll probably get into that one too.
I think that's like a big deal. I don't know.
It sounds like it. Who has spent over a decade leading teams to drive over $200 million in ARR and scaling some of the best B2B SaaS companies in the country.
And Dale just left. We upset him so much he left. He is so upset about this top voice that he's just gone.
Nice.
Adam. I think Adam kicked me out.
My hands are here. I did nothing.
Well, Adam and his team work with founders to build their GTM orgs and successfully transition from founder-led sales, allowing them to scale in not only a repeatable, but a responsible manner. So welcome, gentlemen, to the madness.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Why don't we kick this off by just talking a little bit about go-to-market mistakes and startups, and kind of trying to understand, why do those pitfalls occur? How can founders avoid that? I mean, like we said in the pre-banter, we know it's a very complicated discussion and varies a lot from startup to startup. So
Go ahead, Adam. I'll let you start.
He always does that when he has no idea how to answer. When he doesn't know the answer, let's go ahead, Adam.
I'll give you a layup.
Yeah, right. There's so many of them. I think it really depends on where the startup is in their journey. Typically, when we come in, it's normally there's a little bit of funding that, has been raised. There is maybe a little bit of a sales process, likely founder-led sales. But what you find is the ICP, that ideal customer profile, hasn't really been defined, nor has the buyer persona, which are two very, very different things. And then ultimately what that leads to is you're selling on a value proposition that isn't speaking to the right people at the right time with the right message. And without all of those things aligning, you're going to have a go-to-market motion that ultimately might land 1, 2, 5, 10 clients, but it's not going to be scalable, and it's certainly not going to be repeatable. Dale, was that okay?
It sounded pretty good. I don't know. Okay. You must have read my notes.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll go in a bit of a different direction. I think there's two things that end up happening. One is, since we're talking about fractional leadership a little bit, in these startup companies, they hear a lot of things from investors and other people that are telling them, go hire a full-time CRO, go hire a full-time CMO. And like you were saying in the pre-show, Michael, a little bit, the challenge with that is there's just not enough runway for a lot of this stuff. And you bring in a leader, and then you have no one that can do all the work. And then they're expecting the leader to like cold call and build the strategy and close the deals. And it's like, and then you get sucked into the politics that happen in that process. Like when you're in a company, those political things get really tricky. And lastly, I think what ends up happening is they get this world of like the total addressable market. So because they're pitching for funding and all these different things, they're like, our total addressable market is $350 trillion. And it's like, you know, it's like, if you can just focus on the $400 million market, you know, if you just, what's the target in the ICP? And I think we might talk about that a little bit later, but that's really a good focus, tying it together.
Awesome. So, you know, I told you guys before the show, I'm VP of product management for a company, and I'm curious on your stance as to whether or not there's a difference in go-to-market strategy when you're talking about like a physical, I'm going to go build a widget product, or a SaaS type product. Like, do you guys feel like there's a different go-to-market approach between the two, or are they basically the same?
Good, Adam.
I have so much to say. I'm embarrassed to admit, Dell, have you, and I should know this, have you led sales for a company that's had physical product?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have as well. And it's so hard. In my opinion, it's so much harder with a physical product. I did it for a couple of years, and we actually have a client that's physical product. And what I think a lot of people, Kristy, don't understand is software, you certainly have to be very adept at your, product strategy and, the roadmap, and there's all sorts of things to consider. But physical product, getting this pen from point A to point B and the condition that it needs to be in, and having to rely on third-party suppliers, it's a totally different go-to-market motion that requires, in my opinion, a lot more planning, a lot more nuances. You're relying on a lot more, many more different vendors that you have to look at it totally different. I would argue that anyone who hasn't done physical product doesn't realize how easy software is.
Oh, ouch.
For all the software people, ouch.
Yeah, right.
Listen, I'm a software sales leader now, but like it's a world of difference.
And Adam's phone number is no.
Did somebody say swatting? I don't know.
Yes, exactly. I think Adam.
I live in Bradenton, Florida.
I think the other thing is just unit economics and gross margins. I mean, in like software companies don't think about their unit economics enough, because I think you don't have to as much. You have to understand a little bit, but when you have product, like what's your gross margins? How is that affected? How other people are implementing your and delivering your products? So you have to be on the pulse of where every dollar is spent. In SaaS, you don't really need to do that until like you really have to do it, and then you don't know how to do it. So it's like, Michael, when you're building strategy, I'm sure some of the things you're talking about is like, how much is your CAC? And they're like, what's CAC? Like they don't even know how to define CAC. Like, but with a physical product, you do really have to know that stuff.
That makes sense. I mean, I think I wonder about the difference though in the upfront versus the long term, right? Because that's the one thing that when I work with SaaS companies, I always talk to them about. Like you have this upfront go to market motion, but it doesn't end. Like the renewal is a continuous go to market process, right? So there is a difference. Although certainly some hardware companies are moving to that model, I guess, as well. But just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think physical product's going to get there. I think more physical products going to go subscription. You see a lot of subscription stuff happening. And I think, we're working with a client right now that does physical product type stuff. But the challenge becomes like, how do you renew? How do you upsell? How do you expand? You're going to have new product. Like that doesn't change. Like if you have a physical product and your product sucks, whether it's physical or digital, like people aren't going to renew or expand it. And I think people really have to think about that from the beginning anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm wondering if you think, you said about unit, pricing the per unit, and people in SaaS don't really think about that so much. And I'm just curious about that because I've got some experience with, oh, well, we'll just give it to them and we'll get a bunch of buy-in that way, and we'll get a bunch of testimonials and
PLG, right? It's all PLG. Just give it.
give it away, right? And do you think that plays in the difficulty some SaaS startups have when they try to go to market and try to charge for something that they are previously giving away?
Yeah, I think there's been this focus on PLG that isn't true PLG, right? It's everyone could just launch a product, give it away for free, and then 60 days, I'm going to come tell Dale, well, now that you love it, I'm going to have to charge you for it. That is not a product-led growth strategy. To be clear, people think that it's as simple, and we were talking to a founder the other week about this as exactly that. Oh, we'll just put it out there and give it away and everyone's going to love it. And like, then we're going to charge for it. And like, I would argue that product-led growth done the right way is just as, if not more complicated than a traditional sales-led growth model. There's so many things that you need to be looking at, and you can give anything away for free. If people aren't using it, it doesn't really matter.
Right. That's right.
So just to shift a little bit, because I was thinking about the go-to-market in way it's structured, and all this kind of focus around RevOps, alignment among the organization, and then also specifically like when you work with a startup, I mean, who owns go-to-market? How does that kind of play out, and then how do you get the RevOps team aligned across the business?
Dale.
Most places we start with no one owns go to market. It's like everyone, it's like a 52 car pickup. I think someone needs from our perspective, we need to have someone that owns it full stock, lock and barrel from marketing to sales to customer success, and then RevOps kind of is that overseeing piece across all of them. And I think the reason why, and I'll work backwards, we look at churn. We were talking about churn and expansion, and most people push on churn and expansion as a problem with the CS group, but it could be like you have the wrong ICP. It could be that your sales team was selling something that's not in the box. It could be that your product's just not working, or it could be CS. So all of that touches across all of the attributes. I call myself the chief go-to-market officer, because I do think there's, you have a CRO, but the CRO has always been like sales led. Like majority, I'd say 95+% of people that are CROs came from the sales world, but they don't have the empathy or the transparency with the marketing group, or really understand the CS group. We have the COO, and the COO needs to really worry about operational execution, etc. The ultimate answer is the CEO owns it. But the problem with the CEO owning go-to-market is that in the space we live in, they're technical, they're operational, they can't really spell revenue. It starts with an R, ends with an E, and there's some letters in the middle there.
Revenue.
Yeah, revenue. Yeah.
So that's I don't know if it's a good answer, but I think it's someone needs to own it, but someone needs to own it holistically across all the channels.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of CEO founders also are fundraisers, right? I mean, they have to be that face of the company. So
And you mentioned sales, marketing, customer success, but as components of go-to-market. But what I didn't hear you mention was legal, compliance, right? IT, DevOps. Right? Where do they fall into that? What about product management, project management? Who all is participating in go-to-market?
I think the product can stay in go-to-market, and I think legal does have a subset of go-to-market. One of the ways I used to set it up in some of the companies I worked at is having a deal room every other week, for example, and it would just be open office hours, and it would be run by me, and then I would bring in the sales for the deals that were the most that went across everybody, and everyone was welcome to come to the meeting. And it was very telling to see who came to the meeting and who didn't come to the meeting. I do want legal in there. I do want finance in there. Like, because of back to the gross margin conversation, you ask a founder or a startup CEO, what's your cost of sale? And they don't really know. Like, okay, if we don't bring on any more customers, how much is it going to cost you? And they don't really have that answer. So it is important to have everybody in the meeting. I think you just, as a revenue leader, you have to have an open space for them. And I think you need extreme transparency. And I think that's what most revenue leaders don't do. They don't give extreme transparency.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, RevOps is like this new thing that I think has just come to be in the past several years. And what a lot of people are calling RevOps is sales ops. And they're very different things. Your Salesforce administrator, the person who makes your CRM pretty, is not your RevOps person. Your RevOps person, to Dale's point, is the one who is tying all of this together. They ideally should report, in my opinion, to the CEO. And they are responsible for bringing it all together and deeply ensuring that people understand these metrics. Again, to Dale's point, and he'll never let me forget the fact that I said this twice in one show. Don't know cost of sale. Ask a founder their cost of sale. Well, I think if you don't know that, how do you know who to hire, when to hire, how to hire? Like, that's not just on the physical product side, Kristy, as you were saying, where like there's real margins to worry about. Like, there's still real margins to worry about in software as well.
Yes, there
Hence
is.
all these companies that have just laid off, thousands of people because they didn't think about the real margins.
That's right.
One other sort of follow up in this too, because I've had this conversation a lot lately, and it seems like in some ways we're kind of moving in this direction that sales and marketing are really just a part of the same process, right? And it seems to me like they're starting to come together more and more. I mean, did you guys see that?
I'm seeing companies try to figure out how to get away with more, with less. Like, I'm going to hire one person and they're going to do everything. I know in our engagements, when we go in with our customers, if we go in and there's no marketing or there's limited marketing, like, that's the first thing we like raise the red flag on. Like, we need someone in marketing. We'll help build the message, but that message needs to go upstream. Like marketing, if we think about it, is like the 30,000 foot like group that's brand awareness, what is happening with the product. And then sales is like the infantry, right? Like, we're hand-to-hand combat, we're sending out messages, but that has to be in tandem. And in the past has been very siloed. Marketing would build messaging, and then sales would build messaging, and they would overlap a little bit, but there's no true story happening for the end user. And that end user needs to be drawn into the story all the way through. So I do see it happening with the top brands. And we're in like a SaaS apocalypse. Like, there's zombie companies happening all over the place, right? So either they're executing or they're gonna die. Like, that's the reality. There's no VC funding coming to bail these people out anymore.
Yeah.
No, we saw what happened with the VC funding to bail people out. It was go hire 100 people and that's going to fix your problem. And that's normally what I would have started with when we spoke about GTM mistakes. So I'm glad Dale brought it up and I went in a different direction. But like, the days of not being on the same page are the days of your startup failing.
Right. So we're seeing technology rapidly change many aspects of sales and marketing. So what do you guys see as innovations, whether it's tools like AI or different
Oh.
tactics? What do you think is going to be the most disruptive for our startups' go-to-market strategies in the near future?
It's like a loaded question.
Uh-huh.
Blame Michael.
I think,
Uh-huh.
listen, anyone who says AI isn't going to disrupt is living under a rock. But I think it's how it disrupts. I don't believe AI is going to come take everyone's job. AI is going to eliminate every BDR and every legal person and every VP of sales. What I do think AI is going to do is force you to be damn better at your job. The days of hiding behind, oh, I'm prospecting are over, because we could use AI to automate all of these repetitive tasks so that we could really see who is good from a people standpoint at the things you need to do to grow a company, specifically in sales, building revenue, establishing deep, real relationships. Everyone who says they have a relationship doesn't know what a relationship is, because it's this one-sided, oh, I call my customer and they answer the phone for me. That's not a relationship. If you can't ask them for something and get it in return and vice versa, you don't have a relationship. You have someone who answers your phone call. AI is going to change the space as we know it. I think that when you look at, conversational intelligence, for example, it has become really commoditized. There's, every time I'm on a call, I feel like there's a different recorder from some different company on there recording. What does it do to stand out? How is it going to make your sales reps' lives easier with follow-up, or with capturing key information, or with getting it back to the CRM, or with giving like in-depth real call coaching? AI is the answer for me, hands down.
What you don't realize is Adam is just an AI bot.
I was just gonna say that AI replaces Dale on 90% of my calls.
Nice.
Just a little bit too late, Adam.
As always.
I think I'm gonna go in a totally different direction. I'm gonna not go from a technology direction, but just foundation and fundamentals. Like, can we get salespeople and execution fundamentally sound and foundationally sound? Then we can start using AI. Like, just putting crappy things into AI is going to create even more crap. So can we get them to send recap letters? Can we get them to put the right stuff into HubSpot or Salesforce? Can we get them to do mutual action plans, joint engagement plans, and really care and be curious about the questions that they're asking? So for me, it's getting back to the foundations and fundamentals in understanding, I think, once again, back to the unit economics. When we talk to founders, one of the very first questions I like to ask them is what's your ARR? And if they start talking about their ARR being, 20, 25,000 and below, and then they start talking about the BDRs, because that was a big trend, and they're talking I'm like, where's all this money coming? And why, the unit economics isn't gonna work out for you. So to me, it's basic fundamentals and foundation. The AI, if you're not doing it, you're already behind. So that will come along. But I think foundation and fundamentals.
Yeah, makes sense. So Dale, you mentioned, I think a little while ago, you mentioned a bit about storytelling. So I'm curious what you see there. How does storytelling fit at the corporate level, into a go-to-market strategy? How do you advise companies with that?
It's funny. We just went through a branding exercise just in our own company. And we're a small 3-person company, right? So I think and what I realized out of it, I won't speak for Adam because
please don't.
I speak for him too much, is it made me realize the positioning that we're pushing, while it was good, it wasn't great. And so the storytelling that you tell to the and this is where marketing and sales can kind of blend together, is what is it that you're really going after? Donald Miller's book on storytelling is one of the best out there. And that framework, I think, helps people understand there's a reason why people write books in a framework that tell a story. It's because people are engaged in that story. How do you engage audiences without talking to them? And I think it's through storytelling on your corporate websites, through your go-to-market and go-to-network. That was one other innovation I think that's going to happen. the go-to-network whole world. We've always built sales and go-to-market on relationships, but things are happening in communities, as you guys had Jared Robin on there today. Things are happening in communities where you're getting pricing put out there, you're getting competitive analysis put out there. Like these brands, if you're not in the community, you don't even know how much of your data is getting leaked in these communities. There's more knowledge today than ever. So sorry to tell it briefly.
I mentioned to you that I spent some time at G2, and that's another thing there too, from the review site standpoint. There's so much information out there from the users about the products that it does change that narrative quite a bit, because you're seeing it from the opposite end. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is actually a great product management strategy, right? If you want to
100%.
build a product that is relevant to your users, listen to what they're saying.
Yeah, as long as people aren't gaming the system. Like I saw a lot of gaming G2. Nothing bad about you, Michael, but I saw a lot of G2 gaming.
They still do. I mean, and listen, I love G2, but like, and I don't think it's G2's fault. I think you have companies like, I got an email today from someone that was like, hey, I'll give you a $150 gift card if you go post a review. I've never used their service, to be clear, ever. So like there's an issue with that. But
and we have actually back in the day, we did actually kick some people off because of it when we caught them. But the problem, of course, is you got it, not, so how does G2 know? I always,
it's like a whack-a-mole
about that.
Whack-a-mole.
It is, and I mean, there's a bunch of things that we built in there to try to catch it, but it is a whack-a-mole. You're absolutely right.
If you can't effectively tell a story, you can't effectively grow a company. And I think a lot of people think that this is just sales, and that salespeople need to tell stories, but it's internal as well. And like Dale does a really good job with founders when we're talking like, what's your vision? What's your origin story? How are you saying this? Not just externally, but internally as well. And it all comes down to the need to really be able to effectively storytell.
Can you send me that clip? Because I want to like take that out. He said I did a good job or something.
We'll be happy to do that. Yeah.
Actually, it was a great quote, so we'll probably wind up clipping it anyway, Dale.
Please don't.
We'll just post it everywhere. It's good.
So if storytelling fits in to go to market, what about customer journey? Because one of you guys mentioned something about journey. So, how does that relate to your go-to-market strategy and execution? And, when you do a journey, a lot of times, well, if you're doing one appropriately, you should have different points in that journey where you can have touch points with the customers, right? Like, well, they look at our website, let's send them some socks. How does that fit into... Sorry, we did that one time. They visited our website. They filled out the form. Here's some socks. But how does that fit into go-to-market strategy?
I think it's one of the biggest areas that companies get wrong. We talk about customer journey a lot, and handoffs and touch points and teams working together, and it's marketing. And once they fill out a form, now marketing's done their job, so now it's sales. Oh, they've signed, sales has done their job, now it's success. If you don't have a true solid customer journey from lead to prospect to customer to renewal and expansion, you are doing yourself a tremendous disservice. You have to have those touch points and those mutual handoffs at every stage of the buying process if you want to effectively not just get a customer, but retain a customer.
Right. Keep them coming back. Yeah.
100%. But even I'm going to shoot myself for saying this, what Dale said, like when you have a small ARR product with an extremely quick sales cycle, why the hell are we bringing in a BDR to complicate that and make just yet another touch point? You are making your customer's journey so incredibly difficult that they don't want to buy from you. So the companies that do it right are bringing together your sales leadership, your marketing leadership, your success leadership, and really building out kind of that bow tie model, right? That inverted bow tie of like, what does the journey look like from beginning all the way down through the end? And yes, Jody, I agree with you. It's not a handoff, it's an introduction, because you shouldn't ever just walk away and not be part of that conversation moving forward. Unless I just want to say, please don't talk to Dale again. But other than that.
We got another clip for you, Dale.
Yeah, I think I'm getting a couple good ones here. I always call it a handshake versus a handoff. Like I think there's in that customer journey, there's a couple things that are big problems. One is, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this in a future question, but we build these processes that are internal to us, but we never really talk a lot about the buying process and the customer journey through that buying process.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge miss because we have to understand that the one thing is the customer journey starts before they even have a conversation with you. So how can you get in front of the customer journey? Like, I think people miss that part of the map. They're like, okay, well, they hit our website and like, let's start having conversations. Like, no, they probably read your content on LinkedIn or your CEO's content or some video, and they saw you on some podcast, and that's where the journey starts. And so how can you get in front of that? I don't know the answer to it, by the way. I think that one's a very difficult one.
Let's snip that one.
But I'll give Adam his props. I think Adam's right on this because you have to go through the entire journey, and where are you dropping content in the right places? And this is where marketing can collaborate with sales and CS. If you understand what to drop in what places, people think in the customer journey, we're going to drop content in the top of the funnel all the time, drop the top of the funnel, but they forget about the mid part of the funnel. They forget about the ending part of the funnel. And then they really drop the ball when it comes to CS. Like, hey, they're a customer now. Let's go get more people on top of the funnel. And that's been the traditional piece where I think now the customer journey, if we're talking about the SaaS world, what's the expansion? There's so many people now in the buying process that will buy a sample. We'll do a POC. We'll only take, if you have 100 customers, we'll take 10 customers, 20 customers. How do you get them to 100 customers? Then how do you get them to the next product? Like, we've been doing a lot of work with go-to-market partners, and they talk a lot about that expansion funnel. And I think, Michael, a little bit about what you were saying, in SaaS, it never ends. How do you create a customer journey that never ends? Like, when you talk about that journey, a lot of people are like, oh, well, once they sign the contract, it's over. No, it's only over when they renew, expand,
or don't.
churn.
Or don't.
So it's hard.
You know, one of the things that for years I've done buyer behavior surveys, and one of the data points that has been really consistent, and I mean all the way back to my times at IDC, is buyers constantly have told me, and the last survey I saw was like 68%, that they only contact the salesperson once they've made a buying decision.
Yes.
That sort of changes your idea of buyer journey, I think.
But I'm surprised it's that low.
Correct. Think about it though. Like, and I'm guilty of this, right? Like, I don't want to talk to a salesperson until I'm ready. It's the reason I love Tesla for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is I don't have to talk. I could go online, pick my car, configure my car, order my car, and have it delivered to my door without ever having to be hounded by a salesperson. But if I have a question, I can get someone. And when you look at everything from even SMB, small dollar sales of $19.99 a month, arguably up to true enterprise sales of, $10, $15, $30, $40,000 a month. Right. By the time I'm ready to talk to you, I've done so much research because of everything that's available to me right now that I arguably know pretty close whether I'm going to buy or not. You have to look at that interaction differently than you did historically in the past.
This goes back to that community conversation as well, because guess where people are getting their information before they talk to a salesperson. They're calling the community, they're back channeling, they're figuring out who's used the product, what the product's like. Oh, by the way, how much did you pay for the product? How much did you pay for the product? And it's like, the brands that aren't in the communities understanding this stuff, like, you're just missing out, because people, I've literally sat in rooms, in conversations like this, in sessions where people are like, hey, do you know about product ABC? And someone would raise their hand. Yeah, I know. What do you think about that?
Every piece of software we've ever bought came from someone we spoke to as a company for us, from someone we spoke to. And P.S., we had the pricing conversation too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Earlier you mentioned ideal customer profile, ICP. And we know it's really important, but how does how does a startup go through the process of figuring out the specifics of their ICP, and then how do they use that practically in that go-to-market process?
This is Dale's baby, so I'm going to shut up.
I think, I think they're so jaded because they get so far into funding conversations on the investor saying, "What's your total addressable market? What does that total addressable market look like?" And I think, to me, it always starts with an origin story. Like, why did you build the product, and what are you trying to solve for? And then once you can figure that out, you have to start testing the market. So you sign on customers, and by the way, you're going to sign on your first 10 customers. 2 of them may hit your ICP. I always tell founders, think of an ICP like a bullseye. That little red dot in the middle is exactly your ICP. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be selling to the outer rings. You have to sell to those outer rings, especially to get more feedback, understanding, information. But that center target should be exactly where you're going after. And I think too many people make it too big too quickly. When you hit the center target, now you can get feedback. Now you can get to the outer rings, and you can make that center target much bigger.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, I mean, in some ways, you're testing to see where you can go outside of that circle too, right?
Yeah, depending on where you are in the life cycle. A lot of times, like, we'll get in the companies and we'll start talking about churn and where people are with churn. And actually, I don't think churn's a bad thing, especially if you're like in your Series A, Series B, because you've just brought a bunch of customers on. You're trying to figure out what's happening, and like, no one wants to. Oh no, we're having all this churn. I'm like, forget about the churn. Like, you have the wrong customer. Like, you brought the wrong people in. You needed revenue. Like, everyone understands it. Like, let's start focusing on NRR or net gross retention, and figuring out what that looks like versus why you have churn. Now that we're in here and we're churning people, why are they churning? Why are the customers saying, what pieces of the product do they like? Because the founder's probably like, they like all my product. And you're like, no, they like this part of your product. And they're like, no, but my product's great. And it's like, okay, and it goes back to, when we train salespeople, we don't train them on feature functionality. Train them on objection handling and objections, because that's the business value. That's why you have the ICP, and then they're going to learn the feature functionality way after that.
It's true. So sales, as we know, isn't one size fits all, or if it is, somebody needs to clue me in. What considerations should startups prioritize when structuring their initial sales processes?
Oh my God, there's so many. I'll go back to what we were talking about before, though. What is the buyer's journey? What should the customer journey look like? How do you want to navigate customers through that? And not how does it tie to your sales force? Not how does it tie to like buyer stages? What do you want your customers to experience that aligns with the revenue you need to bring? Too many founders, too many revenue leaders think, oh, like, my sales stage is, Dale and I talk about this all the time, discovery, demo, blah, 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 blah. That is not a buyer's journey. That's all internal crap that is great for us. But no customer's like, all right, Kristy, I'm going to schedule you for your discovery, and then let's have your demo, and then we'll move on to your commercials, and then we'll move. Like, no. Your sales process needs to be as friction-free as possible to allow your customers to move through that process and tie to revenue as quickly as possible. And it changes, right? It changes based on market conditions. So if you are a PLG product, or if you're selling enterprise, or if you're mid-market, that process is going to change. When I'm looking at building out a sales process, it's how can I get the customer from beginning to end as efficiently as possible in a way that makes them as comfortable as possible. And I think there's a lot of new ways to do this out there with great tools that allow you to align with your customer on what I'll call mutual engagement plans. I believe, Dale, you use joint engagement plan, but that really allows that communication to be consistent from beginning to end without 37 emails and 15 Slack messages and let me call you. Like, let's keep it open and transparent from the beginning so that we can get you what you need.
Kristy, I'm so sad. You mean I can't just buy a sales process off the shelf for like $29.99.
Dale, it's $19.99 and 47 pages.
Right.
Okay.
I was going to say that one came with a user manual, Dale, right in the box. And wait, the 90s called. They want their sales process back.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's funny.
please take out the last customer's name from the document you're going to share again. True story.
And I think the funny part is a lot of startup companies, because once again, these founders aren't really versed in go-to-market. They aren't versed in revenue. So they hear things like, oh, I should have Medic, or, hey, I should have Miller Hyman, or, hey, I should do like whatever the process is. Let me tell you, there's a lot of like your process is not only going to be based on the buyer's journey, it's also going to be based on your culture inside your organization. And there's just some things that you're going to have to execute on that may not fit into the normal mold. Everyone has always asked me when they go to hire us as consultants, or when I was working on my own, like, or I was getting hired, what methodology do you go after or do you follow? And I'm like, my own, like, cause I just like, it depends on what you're going to like. I may take some of gap selling. I may take some of, challenger sale. I may take, it depends really on what is best for the organization.
You mean challenger doesn't work for every company, everywhere, every time?
Or Medic, or MedPick, or whatever they want to call the other initial they're putting in there today. Yeah. And I think lastly, I think the biggest problem, because this is the hardest part, mapping it to the buying journey, and going back to the previous question on the ideal customer profile, you're not going to figure out the buying journey. The buying journey is going to change, but if you can figure out your ICP and the buying journey for that ICP, it's going to be like plus or minus 10% deviation. And so if you can figure out that 10 plus or minus deviation, it'd be awesome.
So I'm curious, like, if you were giving advice to the audience and you had just one critical piece of advice to build a robust go-to-market plan, I mean, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, don't follow all of the advice you get from everybody. I would say, like, go with your heart and figure out first what your origin story is, why you built the product, why you're trying to go to market, what you're trying to change, and then find people that have done it in a way that can help you in that process. I would not hire somebody full-time. Obviously, we do fractional work, but even if you don't hire us, I think I've been brought into too many Series A companies, Series B companies where they've run out of runway. They bring me in at the end and they're like, you're a revenue leader. You can close business in 30 days. And you're like, okay, that's not the way you run a go-to-market strategy. Like, and I feel bad. Like, to be honest, that's why Adam and I and Jake has started this company, is we wanted to help companies get out of that place. Like, they have really good product, they have really good fit, but they just run out of runway. And then it's like, there's nothing we can do for them anymore. So that would be my piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback off that. It's not a one size fits all. Every scenario is different. You can't go buy a $19.99 playbook. You can't go buy a $49.99 playbook. Like, it has to be done based on data and based on your individual company. Don't take all the advice out there. Not all advice is good advice. Trust the experts who've done it before. Again, whether that be us or someone else, do your research, validate whoever you're looking to work with. Anyone who does this and does this well can point you to proof points in 2 seconds. Those who can't are the ones that I would be very wary of.
Awesome. Any final thoughts for our viewers today?
Dale's wrong.
I don't think that's a final thought. It's been a theme.
I would say that's an ongoing theme. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think my last thought would be challenge all your assumptions. Just have some self-awareness. Don't always go with gut data. Like, you got to look at the data and understand your data, and just make sure that you're being honest with yourself, because sometimes you just get tied up in your own product so much. So have a little bit of self-awareness and look at the data.
Yeah, my real final thought, and a lot of people have been saying this recently, and it came up even in this, whether you're a founder, whether you're a revenue leader, whether you're trying to build your go-to-market, build your pricing, or even buy software, your network truly is your net worth. Make sure, like, if you're sleeping on networking, and not networking like, oh, I'm clicking follow someone, like building deep, meaningful connections, you're missing out on what I think could probably be the biggest growth hack that there is.
Wow, that's a great place to end.
Yeah.
So that is all the time we have today. You guys both survived the hot seat. Good job.
Yay!
Well, I did. I don't know about him. We'll see what the clips come out
This
to
was
be.
this was a little rougher, but you
Yeah, a
know.
little rough.
But if anybody out there thinks you have what it takes to be in the hot seat, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. That is your ITHS episode for today. Thanks so much for being with us this week. I'm Kristy Tupper.
And I'm Michael Fauscette. Tune in next time for different faces, different topics, different perspectives as we put someone different in the hot seat.